After the death of his wife, a man finds himself unable to reach his son, immersed in silence. They live side by side, but separated by the pain they cannot share, until an unknown girl appears with an unlikely proposal. "If I make your son laugh, will you give me a snack?" If you were touched by this beautiful story of resilience and love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. The Seattle rain pounded against the windows of the sprawling Lake Washington mansion, mirroring the tears that hadn't fallen from Nathan Carter's eyes in exactly 5 months and 22 days. Outside, the water created ripples across the normally placid lake, distorting the reflection of the Cascade Mountains that had once been Elizabeth's favorite view. Inside, the 6,000-square-foot home stood as a monument to absence, cavernous, cold and quiet except for the occasional footsteps of the housekeeper or the soft, reluctant shuffling of 6-year-old Oliver Carter's feet. Nathan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his home office, coffee growing cold in his hand as he stared unseeing at the grey horizon. His watch, a gift from Elizabeth on their 10th anniversary, showed 6:15 a.m. He had another 15 minutes before the morning routine would begin, waking Oliver, ensuring he ate something, anything, and watching him board the private shuttle to Lakeside Academy with the same vacant expression he'd worn since the accident. The accident. Even in his thoughts, Nathan couldn't bring himself to name what had happened. How Elizabeth's car had been struck on the I-90 bridge during a rainstorm, much like today's. How she had been taken from them in an instant, leaving behind a successful tech empire CEO with no instruction manual for solo parenting and a little boy who had stopped speaking almost entirely. "Mr. Carter?" The gentle voice of Mrs. Peterson, their housekeeper of 8 years, pulled him from his thoughts. "Oliver is already awake. He's in the kitchen." Nathan's eyebrows rose slightly, the first deviation from routine in months. "Thank you, Helena." He set down his coffee and straightened his already immaculate tie, a habit that had become more pronounced since the accident. Business attire had become his armor, his way of maintaining control when everything else had crumbled. The sprawling kitchen, with its marble countertops and professional-grade appliances that Elizabeth had loved to use for weekend brunches and holiday gatherings, now felt sterile and oversized. Oliver sat at the island, small legs dangling from the high stool, pushing cereal around in a bowl without eating it. His dark hair, the same shade as his mother's, fell over his forehead, needing a trim that Nathan had been postponing. "Good." "Morning, buddy," Nathan said, attempting a brightness that didn't reach his eyes. Oliver looked up briefly, then back down at his cereal. No words, not even a nod. 5 months ago, this same greeting would have been met with a torrent of words about dreams, plans for the day, or random facts about dinosaurs or space that Oliver had learned from his extensive book collection. Nathan poured himself a fresh cup of coffee and sat beside his son, maintaining the silent routine they'd fallen into. His phone buzzed. Melissa Andrews, his COO at Carter Technologies, with updates about the Singapore expansion. 5 months ago, he would have waited until after dropping Oliver at school to check work messages. Now he scrolled through emails, as Oliver abandoned his barely touched breakfast and slid off the stool. "Oliver," Nathan called, a twinge of guilt rising as his son paused at the kitchen doorway. "Ms. Davis mentioned your art project yesterday. She said it was exceptional." The school counselor had encouraged Nathan to acknowledge Oliver's accomplishments, no matter how small. The boy's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly, but he didn't turn around. "I thought maybe this weekend we could do something," Nathan continued, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. "Maybe the Children's Museum, or—" He trailed off as Oliver continued walking, disappearing into the hallway without acknowledgement. Mrs. Peterson appeared in the doorway Oliver had just exited. "The shuttle is 5 minutes out, Mr. Carter." Nathan nodded, downing the last of his coffee. "Thank you, Helena." He reached for his briefcase, pausing when she didn't immediately leave. "Mr. Carter," she began, hesitation in her usually efficient tone, "I've worked for your family since before Oliver was born." "Yes?" Nathan felt a familiar tension creeping up his neck. Helena Peterson was the only household staff member who had known them before, who had seen what they had lost. "The school counselor called yesterday while you were in meetings. She placed a folded note on the counter. Oliver hasn't spoken a word in class for 3 weeks, not to teachers, not to other children." Nathan stared at the note, something heavy settling in his chest. "I'll schedule another appointment with Dr. Richards." "If I may," Mrs. Peterson continued, emboldened by decades of service to wealthy families in crisis, "I don't think Oliver needs another doctor. He needs his father." The word struck Nathan like a physical blow. Before he could respond, the security system announced the arrival of the shuttle. Nathan grabbed his briefcase, the counselor's note, and followed the sound of Oliver's footsteps to the grand foyer. Oliver stood by the door, backpack dwarfing his small frame, eyes fixed on the floor. Nathan knelt before him, straightening the collar of his uniform blazer. "Have a good day, buddy. I'll try to be home for dinner tonight," he said, knowing his promise rang hollow after dozens of similar ones had been broken. A sudden impulse seized him, and he pulled Oliver into an awkward hug. The boy's body remained stiff, neither returning the embrace nor pulling away. Through the glass panels flanking the massive front door, Nathan could see the shuttle waiting, its lights cutting through the persistent rain. He opened the door, watching as Oliver walked down the covered pathway without looking back. The house fell into silence again as Nathan's driver brought the Tesla around. Another day of meetings, decisions, and distractions awaited him at Carter Technologies' downtown headquarters. Another day of avoiding the framed family photos on his desk, of throwing himself into work, because it was the only area of his life where he still felt competent. That evening, despite his promise, Nathan returned home after Oliver was already in bed. He stood in the doorway of his son's room, watching the small rise and fall of the blankets in the dim glow of the space-themed nightlight. The walls were covered with solar system decals, and rocket ship models hung from the ceiling, all from the period when Oliver couldn't stop talking about becoming an astronaut. Nathan's phone vibrated with another email. He silenced it without looking, an unfamiliar feeling gnawing at him. It wasn't just grief anymore, but the dawning recognition of failure. He was losing his son just as surely as he had lost his wife, only this time it was happening in slow motion right before his eyes. That night, sleep eluded him as it often did. In the early hours of the morning, Nathan made a decision. He sent a message to Melissa. "Clear my Saturday schedule." For the first time in months, he would try to reach his son, to bridge the growing chasm between them before it became impassable. When Saturday arrived, the persistent Seattle rain had given way to a rare October sun. Nathan stood in Oliver's doorway, dressed not in his usual suit, but in jeans and a casual sweater Elizabeth had given him 2 Christmases ago. "Oliver," he said, his voice softer than his boardroom tone, "I thought we could go to Discovery Park today, just you and me." Oliver looked up from his untouched breakfast, something flickering in his eyes. Not quite interest, but not his usual emptiness either. It was the first response Nathan had seen in weeks, and it kindled a fragile hope within him. The park had been Elizabeth's favorite place in the city, a vast urban wilderness where the three of them had spent countless weekends hiking trails and watching ships pass through the Puget Sound. Nathan hadn't been back since the accident, couldn't bear to face the memories that saturated the landscape. But today he would try, for Oliver and perhaps for himself too. As they drove toward the park, the silence between them felt different, charged with an unspoken anticipation that Nathan dared not name, but desperately hoped was the beginning of finding their way back to each other. Chapter 2. The girl in the park, Discovery Park, stretched before them, 300 acres of natural landscape overlooking Puget Sound. Nathan parked near the visitor center, memories flooding back with each familiar landmark. This had been their Saturday ritual, hiking the loop trail, having picnics on the meadow, building sandcastles on the beach below the lighthouse. Elizabeth would pack elaborate lunches in her wicker basket, always including Oliver's favorite peanut butter and honey sandwiches, cut into star shapes. Today, Nathan had stopped at a deli on the way, the paper bag between them on the console, a poor substitute for Elizabeth's lovingly prepared meals. Oliver stared out the window, his expression unreadable. "Ready?" Nathan asked, trying to infuse enthusiasm into his voice. Oliver didn't respond, but unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the car door. Nathan counted this as progress. At least the boy hadn't refused to get out of the car. They walked in silence along the North Beach Trail, the pathway bordered by towering Douglas firs and western red cedars. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of salt water and pine. Nathan remembered how Oliver used to run ahead on these trails, Elizabeth calling after him to be careful, her laughter carrying through the trees when he would circle back with some treasure, a uniquely shaped pine cone or a particularly smooth stone. Today Oliver walked slightly behind Nathan, his eyes downcast, small sneakers scuffing against the dirt path. They reached the meadow overlook, where the trail opened to a sweeping view of the Olympic Mountains across the Sound. Nathan stopped, waiting for Oliver to catch up. "Your mom loved this spot," he said softly, the words escaping before he could consider them. Oliver stiffened, his gaze fixed on the ground. "She used to say it was where the city remembered it was still. Part of the wild," Nathan continued, something compelling him to fill the silence with memories he'd kept locked away. "Remember how she would spread that old blue blanket, and we'd watch for eagles?" A single tear slid down Oliver's cheek, quickly wiped away with the sleeve of his jacket. Nathan felt his own throat tighten. This had been a mistake. He wasn't ready. Oliver wasn't ready. He was only making things worse. "There's a bench over there," Nathan said, retreating to practicality. "Let's have lunch." They sat on a weathered wooden bench overlooking the water, the paper bag of sandwiches between them. Oliver made no move to take the food Nathan offered, his small shoulders hunched against the world. "You need to eat something." "Buddy," Nathan said, the worry he kept carefully controlled at the office seeping into his voice. A sudden burst of laughter drew their attention to a small clearing nearby. A girl, perhaps 9 or 10 years old, was performing an elaborate pantomime for an elderly couple seated on a picnic blanket. Her clothes were notably worn, jeans with patches at the knees, a sweatshirt several sizes too large, and sneakers with fraying laces. But what struck Nathan most was her uninhibited joy as she acted out what appeared to be an impression of a penguin waddling through snow. The elderly couple applauded as she took an exaggerated bow, then handed her what looked like a granola bar. She accepted it with a theatrical flourish of gratitude, then spotted Nathan and Oliver watching. Without hesitation, she bounded over to their bench, her unruly red curls bouncing with each step. "Hi," she greeted, her smile revealing a missing front tooth. "Are you guys having a sad picnic? Because that's what it looks like, and picnics are supposed to be happy." Nathan blinked, taken aback by the direct approach. "We're just having lunch." The girl studied them both, her green eyes landing on Oliver's downcast face. He looked super sad, like the saddest kid I've ever seen. She turned back to Nathan. "Is he always this sad?" Nathan began, then faltered, unsure how to explain their situation to this strange child. "I bet I can make him smile," the girl declared, crossing her arms with confidence. "And if I do, can I have one of those sandwiches? They look really good, and I only got that one granola bar from the Thompsons over there." She jerked her thumb toward the elderly couple who were now packing up their blanket. Nathan found himself both irritated and intrigued by this bold child. "You think you can make him smile? Just like that?" "Yep," she nodded, unperturbed by his skepticism. "I'm really good at making people laugh. It's my special talent." Nathan glanced at Oliver, who was now watching the girl with something close to curiosity, the most interest he'd shown in anything for months. "All right," Nathan agreed against his better judgment. "If you can make my son smile, you can have a sandwich." The girl clapped her hands together. "Awesome. My name's Maggie, by the way. Maggie Dawson. I'm 10 3/4. She stuck out her hand formally. "Nathan Carter," he replied, shaking her small hand. "And this is Oliver. He's 6. "Nice to meet you, Oliver," Maggie said, addressing him directly in a way most adults had stopped doing, treating him instead like a fragile object that might break. "Now get ready for the best show of your life." With that, Maggie bounded a few steps away, clearing her performance space. She adopted a serious expression, hands on her hips. "Once upon a time," she began dramatically, "there was a frog named Fred who dreamed of becoming a ballet dancer. What followed was a whirlwind performance of physical comedy, outlandish voices, and improvised dialogue. Maggie transformed herself into Fred the Frog, demonstrating his clumsy attempts at pirouettes and plies. She played all the characters in her improvised story. The skeptical frog parents, the ballet teacher with a French accent so exaggerated it barely resembled the language, and the supportive dragonfly friend who made Fred a tutu from a water lily. Throughout her performance, Maggie would occasionally trip on purpose, resulting in elaborately choreographed falls that were clearly designed to amuse. Nathan found himself chuckling despite his initial reservations, but his eyes kept returning to Oliver, watching for any reaction. It came during a particularly ridiculous scene where Fred the Frog performed his debut at the Lily Pad Theatre, only to be chased by a hungry heron during his grand jeté. Maggie's wild escape dance, complete with bulging eyes and exaggerated leaps, finally broke through Oliver's defenses. The corner of his mouth twitched, then lifted, and then, miraculously, a small laugh escaped him. The sound hit Nathan like a physical force. It had been so long since he'd heard his son laugh that he'd almost forgotten what it sounded like. The small, hesitant chuckle grew stronger as Maggie, encouraged by her success, doubled down on her performance, adding increasingly absurd elements to her story. By the finale, where Fred the Frog became the first amphibian principal dancer at the Pont de Paris, Oliver was genuinely laughing. Not just small chuckles, but full, unbridled laughter that transformed his face, bringing color to his cheeks and light to his eyes. Maggie ended with a dramatic bow, one arm flung wide. Thank you, I'll be here all week." She approached their bench with a triumphant grin. "So about that sandwich." Nathan, still processing the miracle of Oliver's laughter, reached into the bag and handed her not just one sandwich, but a full meal. Sandwich, chips, cookie, and juice box. "You've earned it." Maggie's eyes widened at the bounty. "Wow, thanks." She sat cross-legged on the ground in front of their bench and unwrapped the sandwich with reverence, taking a large bite. "This is amazing," she mumbled through a mouthful of turkey and cheese. Oliver was watching her intently now, his prior despondency momentarily forgotten. Maggie swallowed and looked up at him. "You want to know the secret to a good frog impersonation?" she asked, and then, without waiting for an answer, continued, "It's all in the cheeks. You gotta puff 'em out like this." She demonstrated, her freckled cheeks ballooning outward. To Nathan's astonishment, Oliver mimicked her, puffing out his own cheeks. "Perfect," Maggie exclaimed. "You're a natural frog face." Oliver's cheeks deflated as he smiled again, a small one, but unmistakably real. "Where are your parents, Maggie?" Nathan asked, suddenly aware that this child seemed to be alone in the vast park. Something flickered across Maggie's face, a wariness that hadn't been there before. "Around," she said vaguely, then quickly changed the subject. "Do you guys come here a lot? This is one of my favorite places. Sometimes I pretend I live in the lighthouse and I'm in charge of saving all the ships from crashing into the rocks." Nathan noticed how she avoided his question, but decided not to press. "We used to come here often," he said, "but it's been a while." "You should come more," Maggie stated, wiping crumbs from her mouth with her sleeve. "It's good for sad people. My foster mom says nature heals stuff inside that medicine can't reach." Foster mom. The casual revelation explained some of Nathan's observations about the girl's appearance and her apparent freedom to wander the park alone. Oliver had inched forward on the bench, his attention fixed on Maggie as she continued to talk about the park, her favorite hiding spots, and the family of raccoons she'd befriended near the South Beach Trail. Her storytelling was effortless, punctuated with sound effects and gestures that kept Oliver engaged. For the first time in months, Nathan saw his son fully present in the moment, not lost in the fog of grief that had enveloped him since the accident. The transformation was so sudden, so unexpected, that Nathan found himself studying Maggie with new interest. This strange, vibrant child had accomplished in minutes what therapists, counselors, and his own fumbling efforts had failed to do for half a year. "Do you come to the park every Saturday?" Nathan heard himself asking, interrupting Maggie's story about the time she supposedly taught a squirrel to high-five. "Pretty much," she nodded, polishing off the last of her cookie. "When the weather's nice. Sometimes I come after school too, but only until it gets dark. We might come back next Saturday," Nathan said, the decision forming as he spoke the words. "Maybe around this time." Maggie's face lit up. "Really? That would be awesome. I could show Oliver the secret cave I found behind the visitor center. It's not really a cave, more like a space between some big rocks, but I pretend it's a dragon's lair." For the first time that day, perhaps the first time in months, Oliver looked at Nathan with something like anticipation in his eyes. Nathan nodded, a silent promise passing between them. As they prepared to leave, Maggie gathered her trash meticulously, tucking it into Nathan's paper bag. "Thanks for the feast," she said solemnly. "It was the best payment I ever got for a performance." "Thank you," Nathan replied, equally serious, "for the performance." What he didn't say, what he couldn't articulate even to himself, was how grateful he was for the glimpse of his son he'd seen today. The Oliver from before, the child who could laugh and engage with the world. As they walked back toward the parking lot, Oliver didn't lag behind as he had on the way in. Instead, he walked beside his father, occasionally looking back to wave at Maggie, who stood at the meadow overlook, her wild red curls blowing in the breeze off the Sound. In the car, as Nathan started the engine, a small voice broke the silence, raspy from disuse but unmistakable. "Dad?" Nathan's heart stuttered in his chest. "Yes, buddy. Can we really come back next Saturday?" 4 words, the first Oliver had spoken directly to him in weeks, felt like the most precious gift Nathan had ever received. "Yes," he promised, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll come back next Saturday." Chapter 3. Unexpected Connections. The week that followed their visit to Discovery Park brought subtle but significant changes to the Carter household. Oliver still didn't speak much, but the absolute silence that had pervaded their home began to crack. At breakfast on Monday, he asked for apple juice instead of orange. On Tuesday evening, he requested his dinosaur pajamas rather than his usual space-themed ones. Small things, trivial in any other context. But to Nathan, each word felt monumental. Nathan found himself thinking often about the strange girl in the park. Maggie Dawson, with her wild red hair and even wilder imagination, had somehow reached Oliver when no one else could. The fact that she was in foster care lingered in Nathan's mind, raising questions he hadn't allowed himself to contemplate. What was her story? Where were her biological parents? Why was she allowed to roam the park alone for hours? On Wednesday, Nathan did something he hadn't done in months. He left the office early. Melissa Andrews, his COO, didn't bother hiding. Her shock when he announced he was leaving at 3. "Is everything all right?" she asked, hovering in his office doorway as he packed his laptop. "Yes," Nathan replied, surprising himself with the realization that it wasn't entirely a lie. "I want to be home when Oliver gets back from school." The look of approval on Melissa's face made him uncomfortable. Had he really become so disconnected that leaving work at a reasonable hour warranted praise? When Oliver's shuttle pulled up to the house that afternoon, Nathan was waiting at the door. The flash of surprise in his son's eyes quickly gave way to something softer, more vulnerable. "I thought we could play that new space exploration game you got for your birthday," Nathan suggested, the words awkward in his mouth. Gaming had always been Elizabeth's domain. She was the one who would spend hours building virtual worlds with Oliver, while Nathan observed from the periphery, too concerned with work emails to fully engage. Oliver hesitated, then nodded. They spent the next 2 hours side by side on the living room couch, navigating digital planets and collecting cosmic resources. Oliver's instructions were sparse but clear. "Go left. That's platinum. We need that. Watch out for meteor showers." It wasn't the enthusiastic commentary that once would have accompanied such an activity, but it was communication, a bridge being rebuilt one plank at a time. By Saturday morning, Oliver was up and dressed before Nathan even knocked on his door. He sat at the kitchen island, already eating the waffles Mrs. Peterson had prepared, a look of impatience on his face that made Nathan's heart swell. They were at Discovery Park by 10, Nathan carrying a cooler with lunch, prepared by Mrs. Peterson, but with his input, including extra sandwiches, just in case. The weather had turned, as it often did in Seattle in late October. A light drizzle fell from steel-gray skies, and the temperature had dropped enough to require jackets. Nathan worried that the conditions might keep Maggie away, and with her, Oliver's newfound animation. They waited at the same bench where they'd met her the previous week. Oliver's eyes scanned the meadow continuously, his disappointment growing more visible with each passing minute. Nathan was about to suggest they take shelter in the visitor center when a familiar voice called out, "Hey, Carter guys, over here!" Maggie was waving frantically from beneath a large cedar tree, its dense canopy providing some shelter from the rain. Oliver's face lit up, and he slid off the bench immediately, moving toward her with more purpose than Nathan had seen in months. "I thought you might not come because of the rain," Nathan said as they joined her under the tree. Maggie shrugged, water dripping from her oversized yellow raincoat. "I always come. Rain is just sky water. Can't let it stop your adventures." "Sky water," Oliver repeated softly, looking up at the branches above them. "Exactly," Maggie beamed at him. "And guess what? Rain days are the best days for treasure hunting because everyone else stays home, so we get all the treasures to ourselves." "Treasures?" Oliver asked, his curiosity piqued. "Yep. After it rains, all sorts of cool things get uncovered. Weird rocks, lost toys, sometimes even coins that people dropped." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Once I found a $5 bill stuck in the mud by the playground. It was the best day ever. I bought ice cream for me and my foster brother." Nathan observed the interaction with fascination. Maggie spoke to Oliver as an equal, not with the careful, pitying tone that adults had adopted around him, nor with the awkward distance his former friends now maintained. She was straightforward, energetic, and utterly unself-conscious. "Want to go treasure hunting now?" she asked Oliver, who nodded eagerly. She turned to Nathan. "Is that okay, Mr. Carter?" "Call me Nathan," he said. "And yes, that's fine, but stay where I can see you." He gestured to the relatively open area around the tree. "Deal," Maggie agreed, then turned to Oliver. "First rule of treasure hunting, you gotta look where other people don't. Everyone checks the path, but nobody looks under the benches or in the tree knots." For the next hour, Nathan watched as Maggie led Oliver on a methodical search of their immediate surroundings. They examined the undersides of benches, dug carefully in the soft earth beneath bushes, and peered into the hollows of trees. Maggie kept up a constant narrative, weaving elaborate stories about each discovery. A bottle cap became a spaceship, medallion from a crashed alien vessel. A smooth stone was declared a dragon's egg that needed warmth to hatch. Oliver, who had barely spoken in months, asked questions, offered suggestions, and even laughed when Maggie pretended a pine cone was attacking her finger. The transformation was so dramatic that Nathan found himself recording snippets of their adventure on his phone. Precious evidence of Oliver's re-emergence into the world. When the rain intensified, Nathan called them back to the shelter of the cedar tree and opened the cooler. "I brought lunch," he announced, "including extra sandwiches." Maggie's eyes widened. "You brought extras for me? For real?" The naked hope and gratitude in her expression made Nathan's chest tighten. "So of course, you're our treasure hunting guide. Guides need proper payment." The three of them sat on the ground, backs against the massive cedar trunk, eating sandwiches and sharing stories. Or rather, Maggie shared stories, elaborate tales, about the park's secret societies of wildlife and the ghosts she claimed haunted the lighthouse. Oliver listened enraptured, occasionally asking questions that Maggie answered with absolute conviction, regardless of how fantastical her responses were. Nathan found himself studying Maggie more closely. Despite her boundless energy and creativity, there were signs of neglect that concerned him. Her raincoat, though functional, was clearly a hand-me-down, several sizes too large and worn thin at the elbows. Her sneakers were soaked through, the left one sporting a sizable hole near the toe. When she pushed up her sleeves to demonstrate how raccoons washed their food, Nathan noticed a fading bruise on her forearm. "Maggie," he asked during a lull in her storytelling, "where exactly does your foster family live?" The question triggered the same wariness he'd noticed the previous week. Maggie's animated expression shuttered slightly. "Ballard," she answered vaguely. "Near the library." "And they know you're here?" Nathan pressed gently. Maggie shrugged, suddenly fascinated with a loose thread on her jacket. "Miss Sharon works on Saturdays. As long as I'm back before dark, it's fine." Nathan exchanged a glance with Oliver, who was watching Maggie with concern that mirrored his own. "What about your foster dad?" Nathan asked. "Don't have one, just Miss Sharon and her mom, who's really old and sleeps a lot, and two other foster kids, but they're teenagers and they mostly stay in their rooms." Maggie brightened, clearly eager to change the subject. "Hey, Oliver, want to see if we can find the heron that lives near the pond? He's huge and grumpy, but sometimes if you're super quiet, he'll let you get really close." Oliver looked to Nathan for permission. After a moment's hesitation, Nathan nodded. "Stay where I can see you," he reminded them, "and don't go near the water." As the children moved to a nearby clearing, Nathan pulled out his phone and did a quick search for foster care agencies in Seattle. The results were numerous, and offered little specific information. He made a mental note to have his assistant look into it on Monday. The rest of the afternoon passed quickly, with Maggie and Oliver exploring the immediate area while Nathan kept watch. When it was time to leave, Oliver's reluctance was palpable. "Will you be here next Saturday?" he asked Maggie directly, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "Totally," she nodded enthusiastically. "I'm here most days after school too, till it gets dark, around 4 usually." Nathan considered this information. Oliver's shuttle arrived home at 3:30. The park was only a 15-minute drive from their house. "Maybe we could come on Wednesday afternoon," he suggested, surprising himself with the offer, "after Oliver gets home from school." Both children had turned to him with matching expressions of delight. "Really?" Oliver asked, hope evident in his voice. "Really," Nathan confirmed, knowing he would rearrange meetings and delegate tasks to make it happen. The joy on his son's face was worth any professional inconvenience. True to his word, Nathan left the office early on Wednesday, ignoring the raised eyebrows of his executive team. Oliver was quieter than usual during the drive to the park, nervous energy emanating from him. "What if she's not there?" he finally asked, as they pulled into the parking lot. Nathan hadn't considered this possibility. "Then we'll still have a nice walk in the park," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Oliver's fragile progress suddenly seemed tied to the reliability of a 10-year-old girl they barely knew. Their concern proved unnecessary. Maggie was waiting near the visitor center, perched on a rock and reading a tattered paperback. She waved frantically when she spotted them, jumping down and running to meet Oliver with such enthusiasm that Nathan half expected her to tackle him. Instead, she stopped short, seeming to sense Oliver's more reserved nature even in his excitement. "You came," she exclaimed. "I was hoping you would. I found something amazing yesterday that I've been guarding super carefully so I could show you." What followed was another afternoon of exploration, with Maggie leading them to a hollowed-out section of an old stump that contained what she described as a fairy village, but was actually an elaborate arrangement of acorn caps, twigs, pebbles and leaves that she had constructed herself. "I've been working on it for weeks," she explained proudly. "Nobody else has found it because it's hidden so well." The care and creativity evident in the miniature village impressed Nathan. While the children continued to add to the fairy habitat, he found himself wondering about Maggie's life outside. The park. What kind of nurturing did she receive? Was anyone encouraging her obvious intelligence and artistic talent? The questions nagged at him as he watched her patiently show Oliver how to create tiny furniture from twigs and bark. Their Wednesday and Saturday park visits quickly became established routine. Oliver began talking more at home, sharing details about school and requesting specific items for their park picnics to share with Maggie. Nathan rearranged his work schedule to accommodate their afternoon outings, delegating more responsibilities to his management team, something Elizabeth had been encouraging him to do for years before the accident. 3 weeks into their new routine, Seattle's notoriously wet autumn lived up to its reputation. The rain that had been a mild inconvenience on previous visits became a downpour, complete with gusting winds that rendered umbrellas useless. Nathan was prepared to call Oliver and explain that they would have to skip their park visit when Mrs. Peterson interrupted his morning conference call. "Mr. Carter, Oliver is quite insistent about going to the park today despite the weather," she said, concern evident in her voice. "He's worried about his friend being alone in the storm." Nathan ended his call early and found Oliver in the foyer, already dressed in his rain gear, a determined expression on his small face. "Buddy, it's really coming down out there," Nathan explained. "I don't think Maggie will be at the park in this weather." "She will," Oliver stated with absolute certainty. "She said she's always there," she promised. The conviction in his son's voice gave Nathan pause. Over the past weeks, Oliver had begun to emerge from his shell, speaking more, engaging with the world again. Much of this progress seemed connected to his friendship with Maggie. If Oliver believed so strongly that she would be waiting, perhaps it was worth checking. "All right," Nathan conceded. "We'll go, but if she's not there, we come straight home. Deal?" Oliver nodded solemnly. "Deal." The drive to Discovery Park was treacherous, with standing water on the roads and visibility reduced by sheets of rain. Nathan questioned his decision multiple times, but each time he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Oliver's determined expression. He continued on. The park was deserted when they arrived, the parking lot empty except for a maintenance truck. Nathan helped Oliver into his raincoat and boots, then grabbed an oversized golf umbrella from the trunk. "We'll check the visitor center and our usual spots," Nathan said. "If she's not there after 15 minutes, we head home." They made their way along the sodden path, wind-whipping rain under their umbrella despite Nathan's best efforts to shield them. The visitor center was closed due to a power outage, its windows dark and uninviting. Their usual meeting spot under the cedar tree offered little protection against the sideways rain. Nathan was about to suggest they return to the car when Oliver pointed toward the meadow overlook. "There!" he shouted over the wind. "Dad, look!" Through the curtain of rain, Nathan could just make out a small figure huddled beneath a picnic shelter, a splash of yellow against the grey landscape. Without hesitation, Oliver broke away from him, running toward the shelter with a speed that caught Nathan by surprise. By the time Nathan caught up, Oliver was already kneeling beside Maggie, who sat huddled on a bench, her yellow raincoat plastered to her small frame, water dripping from her hair and clothes. Despite her clear attempt to find shelter, she was soaked through, her lips tinged slightly blue from cold. "I knew you'd come," she said through chattering teeth, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I was keeping our spot safe." Nathan took in her condition with growing alarm. Her sneakers were completely soaked, the hole in the left one now large enough to expose her sock. The raincoat that had seemed merely oversized before now looked pathetically inadequate against the elements. Most concerning was the way she hugged herself, small tremors running through her body despite her attempts to appear fine. Without a word, Nathan shrugged off his own waterproof jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. It swallowed her completely, but the immediate relief on her face was evident. "Let's get you somewhere warm," he said, making a split-second decision. "You're coming home with us." For once, Maggie didn't argue or deflect. She simply nodded, her usual boundless energy subdued by cold and exhaustion. As Nathan led the children back to the car, sheltering them as best he could with the now useless umbrella, he felt Oliver's hand slip into his, a gesture of trust and connection that had once been commonplace, but now felt like a precious gift. At that moment, under the punishing Seattle rain, something shifted in Nathan's perspective. These park visits had started as an attempt to reconnect with his son, but they had become something more, a lifeline not just for Oliver, but for the strange, vibrant girl who had somehow worked her way into their broken family's orbit. Chapter 4. A New Light. The drive back to the Carter residence was quiet, interrupted only by the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers battling the relentless rain. In the back seat, Oliver had given Maggie his own jacket as an additional layer, despite Nathan's spare coat already engulfing her small frame. The gesture, so thoughtful, so reminiscent of Elizabeth's instinctive compassion, caught Nathan off guard. Through the rearview mirror, he watched as Oliver whispered something to Maggie, who nodded and gave a small smile, her teeth still chattering slightly. The connection between the children was palpable, a wordless understanding that transcended their brief acquaintance. As they pulled through the security gates of the lakefront property, Maggie's eyes widened, taking in the sprawling grounds and the imposing facade of the Carter mansion. "You live in a castle," she whispered, pressing her face against the window. "It's just a house," Oliver replied, though there was a new awareness in his voice, as if seeing his home through Maggie's eyes made him recognize its grandeur for the first time. Mrs. Peterson was waiting at the door, alerted by the security system of their early return. Her professionally neutral expression faltered momentarily at the sight of the bedraggled child between Nathan and Oliver. "Mrs. Peterson, this is Maggie," Nathan explained, ushering the children into the warm foyer. "She needs dry clothes and something hot to drink, please." "Of course, Mr. Carter." The housekeeper recovered quickly, her trained efficiency taking over as she assessed the situation. "I'll prepare the guest bathroom and find something suitable for her to wear." "Oliver's things might fit her," Nathan suggested, noting how similar in size the two children were despite the 3-year age difference. Maggie was small for 10, her slight frame suggesting years of inadequate nutrition. While Mrs. Peterson led Maggie upstairs, murmuring gentle reassurances, Nathan helped Oliver out of his wet outerwear. The boy's eyes remained fixed on the staircase where Maggie had disappeared. "Is she going to be okay?" Oliver asked, his voice small but steady. "Yes, buddy, she'll be fine. Mrs. Peterson will get her warmed up and into dry clothes." Nathan knelt to Oliver's eye level. "That was very kind of you to share your jacket with her." Oliver shrugged, a gesture that seemed to say both, "It was nothing," and, "Of course I would," simultaneously. "Mom would have done it," he said simply. The observation, so matter-of-fact, so true, lodged in Nathan's throat. Yes, Elizabeth would have done exactly that. She would have brought Maggie home without hesitation, would have wrapped her in warmth and comfort with the same instinctive generosity that characterized everything she did. "You're right," Nathan managed, his voice rough with emotion. "She would have." 30 minutes later, the three of them sat in the kitchen, hands wrapped around mugs of hot chocolate. Maggie, now dressed in a pair of Oliver's sweatpants and a sweater that Mrs. Peterson had shrunk in the wash, looked like a different child. Her wild red curls, towel-dried and combed, framed a face that had regained its color. The blue tinge had left her lips, replaced by a chocolate mustache that she seemed unaware of. "This is the best hot chocolate ever," she declared, taking another sip. "It tastes like melted fudge bars, but better. Mrs. Peterson uses real chocolate." "And vanilla bean," Oliver informed her, a hint of pride in his voice. "Mom taught her how to make it." Nathan observed the exchange from the kitchen island, where he was discreetly sending a text to Melissa about cancelling his afternoon meetings. The casual mention of Elizabeth, once so rare and painful, now flowed more naturally from Oliver when Maggie was present. It was as if her uninhibited nature gave Oliver permission to remember the good parts of his mother without being overwhelmed by her absence. "Your house is amazing," Maggie said, looking around the gourmet kitchen with undisguised awe. "It's like those ones in magazines, but people actually live in it." "Would you like a tour?" Oliver offered, setting down his mug. "I could show you my room and the game room and the theater room." "You have a theater? In your house?" Maggie's eyes widened comically. "Like with popcorn and everything?" "It's just a media room," Nathan clarified, though he couldn't help smiling at her enthusiasm. "But yes, there is a popcorn machine." "That is literally the coolest thing I've ever heard," Maggie declared, jumping off her stool. "Can we see it, please?" The tour that followed transformed the house in ways Nathan hadn't anticipated. Rooms that had felt cavernous and empty for months were suddenly filled with Maggie's exclamations and Oliver's earnest explanations. The media room, with its plush recliners and projection screen, elicited a series of cartwheels from Maggie that had Oliver laughing out loud. The game room, with its collection of board games, video game consoles, and table tennis, inspired an impromptu tournament that Nathan found himself drawn into. For the first time since the accident, the sound of children playing echoed through the house. Oliver, who had moved through the spaces like a ghost for months, was animated and engaged, eager to show Maggie his favorite things. And Maggie approached each new discovery with such genuine wonder that it was impossible not to see the house and their privileged life through fresh eyes. In Oliver's bedroom, Maggie marveled at the collection of space memorabilia and science books. "You really love space stuff, huh?" she asked, examining a detailed model of the International Space Station. "I want to be an astronaut," Oliver admitted, the dream he had once proclaimed daily now spoken softly, almost as if he was remembering it himself. "Mom said I could be anything I wanted if I worked hard enough." "Your mom sounds really cool," Maggie said, carefully replacing the model. "My mom used to say I could be anything too, but then she got sick and had to go away." The simple statement hung in the air. Nathan, who had been standing in the doorway, felt his chest tighten at the matter-of-fact way Maggie referenced her loss, so similar to Oliver's, yet framed so differently. "My mom went away too," Oliver said after a moment. "There was an accident on the bridge." Maggie nodded solemnly. "So that really sucks." "Yeah," Oliver agreed. "It really sucks." The frank exchange, free of platitudes or careful euphemisms, seemed to forge another link between the children. Nathan remained silent, recognizing the importance of this shared understanding. The afternoon stretched into early evening, with Maggie and Oliver settling into the media room to watch a movie while Nathan retreated to his home office to handle some urgent emails. Through the open door, he could hear their commentary and laughter, a soundtrack that had been missing from the house for too long. When Mrs. Peterson appeared in his doorway to inquire about dinner plans, Nathan made another impulsive decision. "Let's do pizza," he suggested. "Ask the children what toppings they want." The resulting dinner in the formal dining room, rarely used since Elizabeth's passing, was anything but formal. Maggie's amazement at the fancy table that could fit a whole classroom had Oliver giggling. Her exaggerated appreciation of the pizza. "This is so cheesy, it's like eating a cheese cloud with extra cheese on top." And her stories about the pizza wildlife documentary she'd once watched at the library community room filled the space with a lightness that had been absent for too long. As the evening wore on, Nathan realized they had never discussed how or when Maggie would return to her foster home. The storm continued unabated outside, sheets of rain lashing against the windows and occasional thunder rumbling in the distance. The thought of sending her back out into that weather, even in a warm car with dry clothes, felt wrong. "Maggie," he said during a lull in the conversation, "I think it might be best if you stay here tonight. I can call your foster mother and explain the situation." Maggie's fork paused halfway to her mouth, a flicker of something, relief, hope, uncertainty, crossing her face. "Miss Sharon probably hasn't even noticed I'm gone," she said with forced casualness. "She works double shifts on Saturdays at the nursing home." "Nevertheless, we should let her know you're safe," Nathan insisted gently. "Do you have her phone number?" After some hesitation, Maggie recited a number that Nathan jotted down. "But maybe you could call tomorrow instead," she suggested. "She gets really tired after work and doesn't like to be bothered." The request raised several red flags in Nathan's mind, but he nodded, not wanting to press the issue in front of Oliver. "First thing in the morning, then. For tonight, Mrs. Peterson will prepare the guest room for you." "I can stay? For real?" The hope in Maggie's voice was unmistakable. "Of course," Nathan assured her. "We wouldn't send you back out in this weather." "Can we have a sleepover in the theatre room?" Oliver asked suddenly, turning to his father with an eagerness that Nathan hadn't seen in months. "Please." Maggie joined in, clasping her hands dramatically. "I've never had a real sleepover before. We could build a fort with blankets and pillows and pretend we're camping, but without bugs and rain." The combined pleading of two children, one of whom had barely expressed wants or desires for months, was impossible to resist. "All right," Nathan conceded, "but actual sleeping needs to happen at some point." The resulting celebration, high fives, victory dances, and rapid-fire planning of sleepover activities filled the dining room with more joy than it had contained in recent memory. Later that evening, after helping the children construct an elaborate blanket fort in the media room and ensuring they had enough pillows, snacks, and water, Nathan stood in the doorway watching them. They were huddled inside their creation, flashlights illuminating their faces, as Maggie told what appeared to be a ghost story, complete with dramatic hand gestures and spooky voices. Oliver was enraptured, his expression animated in a way Nathan had feared he might never see again. As he turned to leave them to their adventures, Oliver called out, "Dad?" Nathan paused. "Yes, buddy?" "Are you going to tuck us in later?" The question, so normal, so childlike, yet so poignant given the months of emotional distance between them, caught Nathan off guard. "Of course," he managed, his voice rough with emotion. "Just come get me when you're ready for sleep." After the children finally succumbed to exhaustion around 11, Nathan carried Oliver to his bedroom, while Mrs. Peterson prepared the guest room for Maggie, who insisted she was totally not tired at all, even as she yawned widely. In the quiet of his own bedroom later, Nathan stared at the number Maggie had given him. Something about her reluctance to contact her foster mother immediately didn't sit right with him. Making a decision, he performed a quick internet search for foster care services in Seattle, specifically in the Ballard area that Maggie had mentioned. The search yielded several agencies, but without more specific information, he couldn't narrow down which one might be responsible for Maggie's placement. Nathan made a note to have his assistant conduct a more thorough investigation on Monday. For now, he would honor his promise to wait until morning to make the call. Sleep came easier that night than it had in months. The knowledge that the house contained not just Oliver's quiet presence, but the vibrant energy of another child, one who had somehow begun to heal his son, brought a peace Nathan hadn't expected. He was awakened just after dawn by the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. Following the noise, he found Oliver and Maggie seated at the island counter, watching with fascination as Mrs. Peterson demonstrated how to make perfectly round pancakes. "The secret is all in the wrist," the housekeeper was explaining, executing a flawless flip that had both children applauding. "Dad," Oliver exclaimed when he noticed Nathan in the doorway, "Mrs. Peterson is teaching us how to make Mom's Sunday pancakes." The mention of Elizabeth's weekend tradition, once a cornerstone of their family life, didn't bring the usual stab of pain. Instead, Nathan felt a bittersweet warmth at seeing the ritual revived. "Mom used to put chocolate chips in mine to make smiley faces," Oliver told Maggie, who was watching the pancake demonstration with intense concentration. "That's genius," she declared. "Can we try that, Mrs. Peterson? Please." The housekeeper, who had maintained professional composure through all the changes in the household, smiled warmly. "I think that's an excellent suggestion." Nathan watched as the children helped measure chocolate chips and arrange them carefully on the cooking pancakes. Oliver was explaining the exact technique his mother had used, his hands gesturing animatedly. Maggie listened with genuine interest, asking questions and offering suggestions for pancake art improvements. The scene was so natural, so reminiscent of what their Sunday mornings had once been, that Nathan found himself participating without conscious decision. He poured coffee, set the table, and even attempted a pancake flip that ended disastrously, much to the children's delight. "Dad is hopeless at cooking," Oliver informed Maggie between giggles. "Mom always said he could burn water." "That's a very useful skill," Maggie replied seriously. "If you're ever lost in the Arctic and all your matches are wet, Mr. Carter could just try to make dinner and everything would catch fire anyway." The resulting laughter, Oliver's uninhibited, Maggie's theatrical, and Nathan's surprised but genuine, filled the kitchen with a warmth that had nothing to do with the stove. As they sat down to breakfast, Nathan realized he still needed to make the call to Maggie's foster mother. The thought of disrupting this peaceful morning was unwelcome but necessary. "Maggie," he began gently, "after breakfast, I need to call Miss Sharon to let her know where you are." Maggie's expression fell slightly, but she nodded, resignation replacing her earlier joy. "I guess I have to go back soon, huh?" "Well, it's Sunday," Nathan found himself saying. "Maybe you could stay a little longer. We could watch a movie or play some games before I take you home." The hope that immediately returned to her face made the offer worthwhile, even as Nathan wondered about the situation she would be returning to. Why was this child, bright, creative, obviously intelligent, so eager to postpone her return to her foster home? After breakfast, Nathan excused himself to make the call in private. The number Maggie had provided went straight to voicemail, a generic automated message with no personal greeting. Nathan left a detailed explanation, including his contact information, emphasizing that Maggie was safe and well cared for and that he would bring her home later that afternoon. When he returned to the kitchen, the children were helping Mrs. Peterson load the dishwasher, Maggie treating the appliance as if it were a sophisticated piece of space technology. "You just push this button and it washes everything by itself?" she was asking, fascination evident in her voice. "That's amazing." The casual wonder at something Nathan took completely for granted was another reminder of the disparities between Maggie's life and the privileged existence he and Oliver had always known. It stirred something in him, a mixture of gratitude, compassion, and a growing sense of responsibility toward this child who had brought light back into their darkened home. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of activities, board games, in the living room, a tour of the garden between rain showers, and an impromptu dance party in the media room when Maggie discovered their sound system. Throughout it all, Oliver remained engaged and animated, as if Maggie's presence had unlocked something in him that had been trapped since Elizabeth's accident. By early afternoon, Nathan still hadn't received a return call from Miss Sharon. The continued silence increased his concern, but he kept his expression neutral as he announced it was time to take Maggie home. The disappointment on both children's faces was identical and profound. "Can Maggie come back soon?" Oliver asked as they gathered in the foyer, his voice carrying an edge of anxiety that Nathan recognized all too well, the fear of losing another connection, another source of joy. If it's okay with Miss Sharon, perhaps Maggie could visit again. Next weekend, Nathan suggested, watching Maggie's face carefully. Or maybe even after school. Sometimes. Really? Maggie's expression brightened instantly. I could help Oliver with his homework. I'm really good at math and science. My teacher says I'm 2 grade levels ahead, even though I missed a lot of school last year. The casual reference to missed school was another piece of the puzzle that was Maggie Dawson. Bright, resilient, clearly under-supported. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Peterson appeared with a canvas tote bag. Some leftovers and snacks, she explained, handing it to Maggie. And those clothes you arrived in are clean and dry now, though you're welcome to keep what you're borrowing until next time. The next time, stated as a certainty rather than a possibility, brought a smile to Maggie's face that outshone even her earlier joy at the pancake breakfast. In the car, with Maggie, directing them to an address in Ballard, Nathan made a decision. Whatever they found at Maggie's foster home, he wouldn't simply drop her off and drive away. He would meet this Miss Sharon, assess the situation, and ensure that the connection between Maggie and Oliver, so clearly beneficial to both children, could continue. As they drove through the increasingly wet streets, Nathan found himself planning playdate schedules and potential activities, picturing Maggie's vibrant presence becoming a regular part of their lives. For the first time in months, he was thinking about the future with anticipation rather than dread. Beside him in the passenger seat, Maggie gazed out at the rain-slicked streets, her reflection in the window showing an expression that wavered between happiness and apprehension. In the back seat, Oliver watched her with equal parts contentment and concern, aware in his 6-year-old wisdom that they were approaching a threshold, one that would determine whether the light that had entered their lives would continue to shine or be extinguished by circumstances beyond their control. Chapter 5. Building Bridges. The Ballard address Maggie directed them to was a weathered duplex on a street lined with similar structures, all showing signs of neglect, peeling, paint sagging porches, yards overtaken by weeds. The contrast to the manicured grounds of the Carter estate couldn't have been more stark. That one, Maggie pointed to the left side of a grey duplex, its gutters overflowing with debris from the recent storms. The one with the broken flower pot. Nathan parked along the curb, studying the property with growing concern. The windows were dark despite the gloomy afternoon light, and no car was visible in the narrow driveway. Miss Sharon might be at work, Maggie offered, noticing his expression. She works a lot of double shifts. We'll see if anyone's home, Nathan decided, turning to look at Oliver in the back seat. Do you want to wait here, buddy, or come with us? With you, Oliver answered immediately, unbuckling his seatbelt. The three approached the house together, Maggie noticeably dragging her feet as they reached the cracked concrete steps leading to the front door. Nathan rang the doorbell, hearing a distant, muffled buzz inside the house. After a full minute with no response, he knocked firmly. Maybe try the back door, Maggie suggested, with a casualness that suggested this was routine. Sometimes Grandma Jenkins is home but doesn't hear the front door. Nathan exchanged a glance with Oliver, whose wide eyes reflected his own concern. They followed Maggie around the side of the house, through a narrow passage littered with discarded furniture and garbage bags. The backyard was small and unkempt, dominated by a rusted swing set missing one of its swings. Maggie approached a screen door hanging crookedly from its hinges and wrapped on the wooden frame. "Grandma Jenkins," she called. "It's Maggie." After another minute of silence, Maggie turned to Nathan with a shrug. "So I guess nobody's home. Miss Sharon sometimes takes Grandma to her sister's house on Sundays." "Do you have a key?" Nathan asked, increasingly troubled by the situation. Maggie hesitated, then reached up to the top of the doorframe, feeling around until she produced a tarnished key. "We're supposed to use this if no one's home after school," she explained, "but only in emergencies." "I think this qualifies," Nathan assured her. "Let's go in so you can get what you need." The interior of the house confirmed Nathan's growing suspicions. While not exactly squalid, it showed clear signs of neglect. Dishes piled in the sink, laundry overflowing from baskets, dust thick on surfaces. The living room contained a worn couch facing an outdated television, the coffee table cluttered with medication bottles and old magazines. "My room's this way," Maggie said, leading them down a narrow hallway. "I share with Amber when she's here, but she ran away again last month, so it's just me now." The casual mention of another foster child running away sent alarm bells ringing in Nathan's mind, but he kept his expression neutral as they entered a small bedroom containing 2 twin beds. One was neatly made with a faded floral comforter. The other was stripped to a bare mattress. "That's my side." Maggie indicated the made bed. "I don't have much stuff, so it won't take long to pack." The stuff in question proved to be minimal indeed. A small collection of well-worn clothing, a few paperback books with library markings, and a battered backpack for school. The only personal item of note was a shoebox Maggie retrieved from under her bed, which she clutched protectively to her chest without opening. "Is there anything else you need?" Nathan asked, scanning the sparse room for toys, games, or other belongings typical of a 10-year-old girl. Maggie shook her head. "This is everything important." The statement, delivered so matter-of-factly, tightened Nathan's chest. He glanced at Oliver, who was standing in the doorway looking both confused and disturbed by the stark difference between this environment and their own home. "Where are all your toys?" Oliver asked, giving voice to his father's thoughts. Maggie shrugged. "I have some books and I can use the computer at the library for games sometimes. I mostly play outside." As she gathered her meager belongings into her backpack, Nathan noticed a school newsletter pinned to a corkboard, the only evidence that anyone had taken an interest in Maggie's education. He scanned it quickly, noting the school name and contact information. "Maggie, I'm not comfortable leaving you here alone," Nathan said as she zipped up her backpack. "Is there someone we can call? A neighbor who checks on you or another relative of Miss Sharon's?" Maggie bit her lip, considering. "Mrs. Alvarez next door sometimes lets me stay with her when Miss Sharon works overnight, but she's visiting her daughter in Tacoma this weekend." "I see." Nathan made a decision then, one that would alter the course of all their lives. "Why don't you come back to our house until we can reach Miss Sharon? You can have a proper dinner and get ready for school tomorrow." The hope that flashed across Maggie's face was immediately tempered with caution. "Really, you don't mind?" "Not at all," Nathan assured her. "Oliver and I would love to have you stay a bit longer." "Right, buddy." Oliver nodded enthusiastically. "We could finish our game of Monopoly." As they left the empty house, Maggie carefully locking the door and returning the key to its hiding place, Nathan mentally formulated a plan. First thing tomorrow, he would contact Maggie's school and the appropriate social services agency. The situation clearly warranted intervention. The drive back to the Carter home was animated by Maggie's excited chatter about the half-finished board game and a movie she thought Oliver might enjoy. The trepidation she'd shown at her foster home had vanished, replaced by the exuberant personality that had first drawn them to her in the park. Once they arrived, Nathan made a quiet call to his assistant while the children resumed their Monopoly game in the living room. "Rebecca, I need you to clear my morning schedule tomorrow," he instructed. "And I need some information on foster care procedures in King County, specifically who to contact regarding concerns about a placement." If his assistant was surprised by the unusual request, she didn't show it. "I'll have the information for you first thing tomorrow, Mr. Carter. Shall I also reschedule the Singapore investors call?" "Yes, push it to Wednesday. This is a priority." Through the open doorway, Nathan could see Maggie and Oliver bent over the game board, Maggie dramatically counting out Monopoly money, while Oliver giggled at her exaggerated expressions. A definite priority. The evening that followed reinforced Nathan's conviction. Dinner was a lively affair, with Maggie entertaining them with stories about the secret lives of teachers and her theories about why the school librarian always wore purple on Mondays. Oliver, who had eaten mechanically for months, cleared his plate and asked for seconds, engaged in the conversation and visibly happy. After dinner, Nathan supervised homework, a concept Maggie approached with surprising enthusiasm, proudly showing him her advanced math worksheets while helping Oliver with his reading assignment. The routine felt natural, as if Maggie had always been part of their household. When bedtime arrived, Nathan showed Maggie to the guest room she'd barely used the night before, having spent most of it in the media room fort with Oliver. "This room is bigger than Miss Sharon's whole apartment," Maggie observed, running her hand over the plush duvet. "It's like a hotel, but better." "If you need anything during the night, my room is just down the hall," Nathan told her. "And Mrs. Peterson's quarters are off the kitchen." Maggie nodded, then looked up at him with an uncharacteristically serious expression. "Mr. Carter, thank you for letting me stay. It's really nice here." The simple gratitude in her voice struck Nathan deeply. "You're very welcome. Maggie, we're glad to have you." After tucking in both children, Oliver requesting a story for the first time in months, Nathan retreated to his study. He spent the next hour researching foster care regulations and documenting his observations of Maggie's living situation. The more he learned, the more concerned he became about the apparent neglect in her current placement. By morning, he had made up his mind. After ensuring both children were off to school, Maggie riding along with Oliver in the private shuttle, an arrangement that delighted them both, Nathan headed downtown to the Department of Children, Youth and Families office, armed with notes and determination. The meeting with Jennifer Wilson, a veteran social worker with tired eyes and a compassionate demeanor, was both informative and concerning. "Maggie Dawson," she repeated, typing the name into her computer. "Yes, she's been in the system since age 7. Currently placed with Sharon Jenkins, a licensed foster parent in Ballard." She scanned the file, her expression growing more troubled. "There have been some flags on this placement. 2 runaway incidents with another foster child, some school attendance issues last year. Nothing severe enough to warrant immediate removal, but concerning patterns. She was alone yesterday," Nathan explained. "No supervision, no proper food in the house from what I could see. She mentioned that this happens regularly." Jennifer made notes, her mouth set in a grim line. "Unfortunately, we're seeing more of this. Foster parents stretched too thin, taking in children for the stipend, but providing minimal care. We're severely understaffed for proper monitoring." She looked up at Nathan directly. "You said she's formed a connection with your son?" "Yes, they've become friends. She's had a remarkable positive effect on him." Nathan hesitated, then decided. "On complete honesty, my wife passed away 5 months ago. Oliver had essentially stopped speaking, stopped engaging with the world. Meeting Maggie has brought him back somehow." Jennifer's expression softened. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Carter, and I'm glad your son is finding his way forward." She studied him thoughtfully. "What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here today?" "I want to ensure Maggie's safety and well-being," Nathan stated firmly. "If that means reporting her current foster situation, I'm prepared to do that. But I'm also—" He paused, the words forming as he spoke them. "I'm also interested in possibly becoming a foster parent myself. Specifically for Maggie." The statement once voiced felt right in a way Nathan hadn't anticipated. Jennifer didn't seem surprised. "That's a significant commitment, Mr. Carter. There's training required, home studies, background checks. The process typically takes several months." "I understand, but in the meantime, is there any way Maggie could stay with us temporarily, given the concerns about her current placement?" Jennifer typed some more notes, considering. "There is an emergency placement protocol for situations where a child's current environment is deemed potentially harmful. Given your relationship with Maggie and your son's connection to her, you could potentially qualify as a kinship caregiver under emergency provisions." "What would that entail?" "An expedited background check, an initial home assessment, and temporary custody while the full foster certification process proceeds." She looked at him seriously. "It's still a significant undertaking, Mr. Carter. Are you certain this is something you want to pursue?" Nathan thought of Oliver's laughter as he played with Maggie, of the light returning to his son's eyes, of Maggie's wonder at simple things like dishwashers and clean bedrooms. He thought of Elizabeth, who had taught him that family was less about blood ties than about love and commitment. "Yes," he said firmly, "I'm certain." The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of bureaucracy and adaptation. Following a formal investigation of Sharon Jenkins' home, which confirmed Nathan's observations of neglect, Maggie was placed with the Carters under emergency kinship care provisions. Nathan began the intensive process of foster parent certification, attending evening classes and submitting to detailed background checks. Meanwhile, life at the Carter household transformed. The rigid silence that had defined their existence for months gave way to a new rhythm. Homework sessions at the kitchen island, weekend outings to museums and parks, movie nights where Maggie's running commentary had Oliver in stitches. Mrs. Peterson, initially reserved about the new addition, soon became an ally, teaching Maggie to bake cookies and maintaining a special drawer of art supplies for her creative projects. Maggie thrived in the stability of the Carter home. Her teachers reported improved concentration and participation. The shadows under her eyes disappeared. Her wild curls, properly nourished and cared for, became a gleaming auburn mane that she proudly wore in elaborate braids taught to her by Mrs. Peterson. The most remarkable transformation, however, was in Oliver. He began speaking not just to Maggie, but to his teachers, to his father, even to the children at school who had kept a cautious distance since Elizabeth's accident. He started bringing home friends for playdates, his bedroom once again filling with the sounds of children's laughter and imaginative games. One evening, after the children were in bed, Nathan found himself in his study, surrounded by the foster care certification paperwork. The home study had been completed successfully. The background checks had cleared. The required training hours were almost fulfilled. Soon he would need to decide whether to pursue a more permanent arrangement for Maggie. His eyes drifted to the family photograph on his desk, himself, Elizabeth, and a 4-year-old Oliver at Mount Rainier, all smiles against the backdrop of wildflowers and snow-capped peaks. For months after the accident, he couldn't bear to look at it directly. Now he picked it up, studying Elizabeth's radiant smile, the laugh lines around her eyes, the way she held Oliver's hand with such natural tenderness. "What would you do, Lizzie?" he whispered to the photograph. "You always knew the right thing." He could almost hear her response. "You already know, Nate. You're just looking for permission to trust your heart." A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to find Oliver in the doorway, pajama-clad and serious. "Hey, buddy. Everything okay?" Oliver nodded, padding across the carpet to stand beside Nathan's chair, his eyes fixed on the photograph in his father's hands. "I miss Mom," he said simply. "I miss her too," Nathan replied, pulling his son closer. "Every day." Oliver leaned against him, studying the photograph. "I think Mom would like Maggie." My observation, so aligned with Nathan's own thoughts, caught him by surprise. "Why do you say that?" "Because Maggie makes people happy," Oliver explained with the straightforward logic of childhood. "Mom always said that was the most important job." Nathan smiled, remembering Elizabeth's philosophy. She had been a renowned pediatric surgeon, saving children's lives daily, yet she always maintained that her most important work was creating happiness wherever she could. "You're right," Nathan agreed. "Mom would definitely like Maggie." Oliver was quiet for a moment, then asked the question that had clearly brought him to the study in the first place. "Is Maggie going to stay with us forever?" The vulnerability in his son's voice made Nathan's decision crystal clear. "Would you like that?" Oliver nodded emphatically. "She's like the sister I never got. Mom always said maybe someday I'd have a little brother or sister." The casual reference to conversations with Elizabeth that Nathan hadn't been privy to struck him deeply. Elizabeth had wanted more children. They had discussed it theoretically, always pushing it to some future date when Nathan's company was more established, when they had more time. Now that future would never come, at least not as they had imagined it, but perhaps a different future was possible. "I'm working on making sure Maggie can stay with us," Nathan told Oliver, "not just for a little while, but permanently. Would that make you happy?" Oliver's answer was a fierce hug that conveyed everything words couldn't. The next morning, Nathan contacted Jennifer Wilson to accelerate the permanent placement process. By the end of the month, with the foster certification complete, Nathan broached the subject of adoption with Jennifer. "It's unusual to move this quickly," she cautioned during their meeting at the DCYF office. "Typically, we prefer a child to be in a foster placement for at least 6 months before adoption proceedings begin." "I understand," Nathan acknowledged, "but Maggie's situation is somewhat unique. She's formed a strong bond with our family, she's thriving in school, and her previous placement has been officially deemed unsuitable." He leaned forward, conviction in his voice. "I'm not looking to rush this for my convenience. I'm thinking of what's best for Maggie and for my son, who's come to see her as family." Jennifer studied him thoughtfully. "You've surprised me. Mr. Carter, When you first walked into my office, I assumed you were another wealthy man looking for a quick fix to a complicated situation. I've seen it before. Well-intentioned people who underestimate the commitment involved in taking in a child from difficult circumstances. And now, Nathan asked, now I believe you're genuinely committed to Maggie's well-being. She smiled slightly. The fact that you've completed every requirement in record time while running a major corporation and caring for your own child is impressive. Your home study was exemplary, and Maggie's caseworker reports she's never seen the child so happy and stable. She closed the file on her desk decisively. I'll support your petition for adoption. It will still take time. Legal proceedings always do. But I'll recommend expediting the process given the circumstances. That evening, Nathan made a decision. While the legal process would take months to complete, his commitment was already absolute. The guest room that Maggie had been using would become her permanent space, not just a temporary accommodation, but a real bedroom that reflected her personality and interests. With Oliver's enthusiastic help, Nathan planned a complete transformation of the room. They selected paint samples in shades of teal and purple, Maggie's favorite colors, and browsed furniture catalogs for a proper desk where she could do her advanced schoolwork. Oliver insisted on a bookshelf, as big as the one in the library, to hold all the books Maggie loved to read. The project became a bonding experience for father and son. They worked together on weekends while Maggie was at her art class, a program Nathan had enrolled her in after noticing her talent for drawing. They painted walls, assembled furniture, and carefully selected decorations that matched Maggie's eclectic tastes. Mrs. Peterson contributed as well, sewing custom curtains and a quilt from fabrics they had chosen together. Even Melissa from Sue. The office got involved, suggesting an interactive star projector for the ceiling after hearing about Maggie's fascination with astronomy. 3 weeks later, the room was complete, a space designed specifically for Maggie, with every detail thoughtfully considered. The walls were a soothing teal that transitioned to deep purple near the ceiling, where glow-in-the-dark stars formed actual constellations. The furniture was solid and high quality, built to last through childhood and beyond. Bookshelves lined one wall, already partially filled with classics and contemporary children's literature. A comfortable window seat overlooked the lake, piled with pillows in various textures and patterns. On a Saturday afternoon in December, nearly 2 months after Maggie had first come to stay with them, Nathan and Oliver led her to the closed door of what had been the guest room. "We have something to show you," Nathan said, trying to contain his excitement. "A surprise," Oliver added, practically bouncing with anticipation. Maggie looked between them, curiosity and a hint of apprehension on her face. In the week she had lived with them, she had grown more confident, more trusting, but surprises still made her wary, a vestige of a life where unexpected things were rarely positive. "It's a good surprise," Oliver assured her, sensing her hesitation. "The best surprise ever." "Okay," Maggie agreed, her trust in Oliver evident. "I'm ready." Nathan opened the door, and Maggie stepped into what was now, undeniably, her room. Her gasp was audible as she took in the transformation, the colors she loved, the perfect reading nook, the desk with art supplies arranged in rainbow order, the bookshelf filled with adventures waiting to be explored. For a long moment, she stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes wide as they traveled from one thoughtful detail to another. Then, without warning, she burst into tears. Oliver looked alarmed. "Don't you like it?" Maggie nodded vigorously through her tears. "I love it," she managed between sobs. "It's the most beautiful room I've ever seen." "It's your room," Nathan said gently. "Not just for now, but for as long as you want it to be." Maggie turned to him, her freckled face streaked with tears, but radiant with joy. "Forever? I can stay forever?" Nathan knelt to her eye level, his own vision blurring slightly. "We're hoping so, yes. I've started the process to adopt you legally, if that's what you want." "To be part of our family," Oliver clarified, slipping his hand into Maggie's. "For real." The hope that bloomed on Maggie's face was like watching the sun rise after the longest night. "You want me? For real?" "For real," Nathan confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. "You belong here, Maggie, with us." What followed was a group hug of such intensity that Nathan nearly lost his balance, one arm around each child, as Maggie alternated between laughter and tears. Oliver was beaming, secure in the knowledge that his friend, his sister, wouldn't be taken away. Later that evening, after an impromptu celebration dinner and Maggie's insistence on sleeping in her new room right this very minute, even though it's only 7 o'clock, Nathan stood in his bedroom, gazing out at the lake. The December darkness had settled early, but the house no longer felt shadowed by grief. Instead, it vibrated with a new energy, the energy of healing, of moving forward, of family being rebuilt, in an unexpected but beautiful configuration. On his nightstand, Elizabeth's photograph seemed to smile at him with approval, her wisdom echoing in his heart. Family was never just about blood. It was about love, commitment, and the courage to open your heart even after it's been broken. Chapter 6. Healing Hearts. Spring arrived in Seattle with its characteristic blend of sunshine and showers, painting the city in vibrant greens and pinks as cherry blossoms exploded along residential streets. At Lake Washington, the Carter property bloomed with renewed life, much like the family that inhabited it. 4 months had passed since Maggie had officially become a foster child in the Carter home, and the legal proceedings for her adoption were moving forward, albeit at the frustratingly slow pace of family court. Nathan had hired Patricia Gonzalez, one of the city's most respected family law attorneys, to navigate the complexities of the adoption process. These things take time, Patricia reminded him during their monthly meeting in her downtown office, especially when there are biological relatives who need to be notified. This particular aspect of the process had been a revelation to Nathan. Jennifer Wilson had located Maggie's maternal aunt in Oregon, a woman who had lost touch with Maggie's mother years before and had been unaware of her niece's situation. While Teresa Bailey had expressed no interest in taking custody of Maggie, her existence complicated the legal proceedings. She signed the consent forms, Patricia assured Nathan, but the court still needs to ensure all proper procedures are followed. We're making progress, Nathan, good progress. Nathan nodded, understanding the necessity, but impatient nonetheless. In his heart, Maggie was already his daughter, already a permanent part of their family. The legal formalities seemed unnecessary, given how seamlessly she had integrated into their lives. At home, the transformation was complete. Maggie had blossomed from the scrappy, undernourished girl they'd met in the park into a confident, thriving 10-year-old. Her academic achievements were remarkable. She had been moved into an advanced program at school after testing well above grade level in multiple subjects. Her artistic talents had flourished with proper encouragement and materials, her drawings now proudly displayed throughout the house alongside Oliver's space-themed creations. Most importantly, the bond between Maggie and Oliver had deepened into something that transcended friendship. They moved through the house as a unit, finishing each other's sentences, developing elaborate inside jokes, and fiercely defending each other when needed. Oliver had appointed himself Maggie's official protector at school, while Maggie helped him navigate the social complexities that sometimes baffled him. That evening, as Nathan helped the children with their science projects at the kitchen island, Oliver building a model solar system, Maggie creating a detailed diagram of a rainforest ecosystem, he marveled at how natural it all felt. The rhythm of their family life had adjusted to include Maggie so completely that it was difficult to remember a time before she had been part of it. "Dad, can you help me hang Saturn? The string keeps tangling," Oliver asked, holding up a styrofoam planet painted in meticulous rings of orange and yellow. "Of course, buddy," Nathan replied, setting down the glue gun he had been using to help Maggie attach tiny paper frogs to her rainforest layers. As he untangled the fishing line for Oliver's planet, Nathan caught Maggie watching him with an expression he had come to recognize, a mixture of wonder and uncertainty, as if she still couldn't quite believe her good fortune. "What's on your mind, Mags?" he asked gently, using the nickname that had emerged naturally over the past months. She hesitated, then spoke with the directness that characterized her approach to life. "Ms. Wilson came to school today for our monthly check-in." Nathan nodded, continuing to work on the tangled string. "Yes, she mentioned she'd be seeing you. How did it go?" "Good. She asked lots of questions about living here and if I'm happy." Maggie carefully attached another paper frog to her diagram. "And she asked if I understood what adoption means." "And what did you tell her?" Nathan asked successfully, freeing the string and handing it back to Oliver. I told her it means you become my real dad, legally and everything, and Oliver becomes my real brother. She paused, focusing intently on her project, and she asked if that's what I want. Oliver looked up from his planets, suddenly alert to the serious turn in conversation. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of anxiety. Maggie's face broke into a sunshine smile. "I said it's the only thing I've wished for since forever, that this is the best family in the whole world, and I want to be a Carter more than anything." The relief on Oliver's face was palpable. "Good," he declared firmly, "because you're already my sister, no matter what some judge says." Nathan felt a swell of pride at his son's assertion. Oliver had come so far from the silent, withdrawn child of 6 months ago. His capacity for love and loyalty had not only survived Elizabeth's passing, but had expanded to include Maggie with a fierceness that sometimes took Nathan's breath away. "Ms. Wilson said the judge will probably want to talk to me," Maggie continued, returning to her project. "Is that scary?" "Not at all," Nathan assured her. "The judge just wants to make sure this is what you want, and that you're happy here. They're looking out for your best interests." "My best interest is staying here forever and ever," Maggie stated with absolute conviction. "I'll make sure the judge knows that." Later that night, after the children were in bed, Nathan sat in his study reviewing quarterly reports from Carter Technologies. Under Melissa's capable management, the company had continued to thrive despite his reduced involvement. 6 months ago, the idea of stepping back from the CEO role would have been unthinkable to Nathan. Now his priorities had shifted so fundamentally that work occupied a different space in his life, important but no longer all-consuming. A soft knock at the study door drew his attention. Maggie stood in the doorway, hair tousled from her pillow, wearing the space-themed pajamas that matched Oliver's, a Christmas gift they had both been delighted with. "Everything okay?" Nathan asked, setting aside his laptop. Maggie nodded, padding across the carpet to perch on the edge of his desk, a habit she had developed during their evening conversations. "I couldn't sleep. My brain is too busy." "Busy with what?" "Thinking. About family stuff." She swung her legs, studying the family photos Nathan had recently updated to include her. "I was wondering about my first mom. Do you think she'd be mad that I want to be adopted?" The question caught Nathan off guard, though in retrospect he should have anticipated it. Maggie rarely spoke about her biological parents, and Nathan had been careful not to press, following the guidance of the child psychologist who had emphasized the importance of letting Maggie set the pace for such discussions. "I don't think she'd be mad at all," Nathan said carefully. "From what I understand, your mom loved you very much. I think she would want you to be safe and happy and loved." "She did love me," Maggie confirmed, her voice soft with memory. "She used to call me her sunshine girl because she said my hair was like carrying the sun around." She touched her auburn curls self-consciously. "But then she got really sick and everything changed." Nathan listened attentively, recognizing the significance of Maggie voluntarily sharing these memories. "The social workers told me she had something called bipolar disorder," Maggie continued, "and she didn't take her medicine like she was supposed to. That's why she couldn't take care of me anymore." "That must have been very hard for both of you," Nathan offered gently. Maggie nodded. "She went to the hospital a lot, and then one time she didn't come back." Her expression grew distant. "That's when I went to my first foster home. There were a lot of them after that." The matter-of-fact way she described what must have been traumatic transitions broke Nathan's heart. He had read her file, knew the clinical details of her journey through the foster system, 5 placements in 3 years before landing with Sharon Jenkins, none lasting more than 8 months. The emotional toll of such instability was impossible to quantify. "I think," Nathan said carefully, "that mothers want what's best for their children even when they can't provide it themselves. Your first mum would be proud of how brave and resilient you've been. And I believe she would be happy that you've found a forever family who loves you." Maggie absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. "Oliver's mum died in an accident," she stated. "My mom didn't exactly die, but she couldn't be my mom anymore. It's kind of the same, right?" "In some ways," Nathan agreed. "You both experienced a profound loss, and you've both shown incredible courage in moving forward." Maggie was quiet for a moment, then asked the question that had clearly been at the heart of her midnight wandering. "Do you think there's enough room in your heart for me, since Oliver's mum was your wife and you loved her so much?" The directness of the question struck Nathan like a physical force. He reached out, taking Maggie's small hands in his. "Maggie, hearts don't work like containers with limited space," he explained. "They're more like gardens. The more love you plant, the more grows. Loving you doesn't diminish my love for Elizabeth or for Oliver. It just makes the garden bigger." Maggie considered this analogy, her analytical mind visibly processing it. "So your heart garden has a spot for me that's just mine?" "Exactly. A spot that only you could fill." Nathan squeezed her hands gently. "Elizabeth would have loved you, Maggie. She believed that family was about love, not just biology. She would have been the first to welcome you into our lives." Maggie smiled, satisfaction settling over her features. "I think I can sleep now," she declared, hopping off the desk. At the door she paused, looking back at Nathan with uncharacteristic shyness. "I love you, like a real dad." Before Nathan could respond, she had disappeared down the hallway, leaving him with a heart so full it felt like it might overflow. The following weeks brought progress on the adoption front, with Patricia reporting that the court date had been set for early June. "Just in time for summer vacation," she noted. "Perfect timing for a family celebration." At home, preparations took on a festive air. The children debated potential celebration venues, Oliver advocating for the Pacific Science Center, while Maggie pushed for the Woodland Park Zoo. Peterson began researching special occasion cakes, and Melissa organized a company-wide gift collection for what she termed Operation Official Carter. Amid the excitement, Nathan found himself reflecting more frequently on Elizabeth, especially as certain milestones approached. Mother's Day arrived with a bittersweet quality. Oliver's second without Elizabeth, Maggie's fourth without her biological mother. Nathan had worried about how the day might affect them, but the children approached it with unexpected wisdom. "We should do something special for Mom," Oliver suggested over breakfast the day before. "Even though she's not here." "Like what?" Nathan asked, touched by his son's thoughtfulness. "Maybe we could go to her favorite place." "And bring flowers?" Oliver looked to Maggie for support. "That's a good idea," Maggie agreed solemnly. "We could make cards too. Mrs. Peterson said people who are gone can still see when you do nice things for them." The next day found them at Elizabeth's favorite spot in the Washington Park Arboretum, spreading a blanket beneath a flowering cherry tree. The children had created elaborate cards, Oliver's featuring a detailed drawing of the family, including Maggie with Elizabeth watching from a cloud, Maggie's containing a poem she had written about mothers who watched over children from the sky. As they sat together, sharing memories and the picnic lunch Mrs. Peterson had prepared, Nathan marveled at the resilience of children, their capacity to incorporate loss into their worldview without being defined by it. Oliver spoke about his mother with a blend of sadness and joy, sharing stories that made him laugh and occasionally tear up. Maggie listened attentively, asking questions about Elizabeth that helped Oliver articulate his memories more clearly. "She sounds amazing," Maggie said after Oliver described how Elizabeth had once stayed up all night to build a papier-mâché solar system for his preschool science fair. "I wish I could have met her." "She would have liked you," Oliver stated with certainty. "Dad says so too." "Your mom loved people who made others happy," Nathan added. "That's what made her such a wonderful doctor. She cared about the whole person, not just the medical issue. She would have adored your spirit, Maggie." As May turned to June, the final legal hurdles for the adoption were cleared. The home study was finalized, all necessary documents were filed, and background checks were completed. All that remained was the court hearing, where a judge would make the adoption official. The morning of the hearing dawned bright and clear, a rarity for early June in Seattle. The children were up at dawn, too excited to sleep, dressed in their carefully selected outfits long before they needed to leave for the courthouse. Oliver wore a navy suit that made him look older than his 7 years, while Maggie had chosen a teal dress that complemented her auburn hair, which Mrs. Peterson had braided elaborately for the occasion. "Do I look okay?" Maggie asked nervously, twirling in front of Nathan as he adjusted his tie in the foyer mirror. "Is this fancy enough for court?" "You look perfect," Nathan assured her. Absolutely perfect. The courthouse itself was an imposing sandstone building in downtown Seattle, its formal architecture a stark contrast to the family's nervous excitement. Patricia met them at the entrance, resplendent in a tailored suit, her confidence reassuring as she led them through security and up to the third-floor courtroom. "Judge Reynolds is wonderful with children," she told Maggie, who was clutching Nathan's hand tightly. "Just be yourself and answer honestly. Everything is going to go beautifully." The courtroom was smaller and less intimidating than Nathan had imagined, with warm wood paneling and natural light streaming through tall windows. Jennifer Wilson was already seated, along with several other officials involved in the case. Mrs. Peterson had come as well, sitting beside Melissa, who had taken the morning off to support the family. When Judge Reynolds entered, a grandmotherly woman with silver hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses, the proceedings began with a formality that soon gave way to a more conversational tone. The judge reviewed the case file, asked Patricia several clarifying questions, and then turned her attention to the family. "Maggie," she said warmly, "would you come up here and talk with me for a moment?" Maggie looked momentarily terrified, but squared her shoulders and walked to the front of the courtroom with the determined stride that Nathan had come to associate with her facing challenges. The conversation that followed was both touching and amusing as Maggie answered the judge's questions with her characteristic blend of directness and creativity. When asked about her life with the Carters, she launched into an enthusiastic description of her room, the family's weekend adventures, and Mrs. Peterson's cooking lessons. When questioned about how she got along with Oliver, she described him as the best brother anyone could have, even when he leaves his space robots on the floor where I step on them with bare feet. The courtroom erupted in gentle laughter, Oliver's indignant "that was one time" only adding to the moment of levity. Finally, Judge Reynolds asked the most important question. "And is it your wish, Margaret Elaine Dawson, to be legally adopted by Nathan Carter, becoming his daughter and a permanent member of the Carter family?" Maggie's answer was immediate and fervent. "More than anything in the world, Your Honor. And you understand that this means Mr. Carter will be your legal father, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails, and that your name would legally change to Margaret Elaine Carter." Maggie nodded solemnly, then remembered to add, "Yes, Your Honor, I understand." Judge Reynolds then called Nathan forward, asking him a series of questions about his understanding of the responsibilities of adoption and his commitment to Maggie's well-being. His answers came from the heart, unscripted and sincere. "Maggie has brought immeasurable joy and light back into our home," he concluded. "She belongs with us. She is already my daughter in every way that matters. I'm just asking the court to make official what we already know to be true." When Oliver was invited to share his thoughts, his simple statement, "Maggie fixed our family when it was broken, and now we need to make sure she stays forever," brought tears to several eyes in the courtroom, including the judges. After reviewing the final recommendations from Jennifer Wilson and the guardian ad litem appointed to represent Maggie's interests, Judge Reynolds smiled broadly. "It gives me great pleasure," she announced, "to approve this adoption. From this day forward, Margaret Elaine Dawson shall be legally known as Margaret Elaine Carter, with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities of a natural-born child of Nathan Carter." She signed the decree with a flourish, then came around the bench to present it to Maggie personally. "Congratulations, Miss Carter. It seems to me you found exactly where you belong." The celebration that followed was both elaborate and intimate. A luncheon at Maggie's favorite restaurant near the waterfront, attended by everyone who had helped make the adoption possible. A special cake from Mrs. Peterson, decorated with the words, "Welcome home officially, Maggie Carter," in teal frosting. Gifts from Nathan's colleagues at Carter Technologies, from Oliver's classmates, from Maggie's teachers. But the most meaningful moment came later that evening, in the privacy of their home. Nathan had one final surprise, one he had been planning for months, waiting for the perfect moment. After dinner, he gathered the children in the living room, where a small gift-wrapped box waited on the coffee table. "This is for you, Maggie," he said, pushing the box toward her. "A little something to mark today." Maggie opened the package carefully, preserving the ribbon as she always did, a habit born from years of having so little that even wrapping paper was precious. Inside lay a velvet jewelry box, which she opened with widening eyes. Nestled against the satin lining was a delicate gold locket, oval-shaped and engraved with intricate vines and flowers. "Open it," Nathan encouraged softly. Maggie's fingers trembled slightly as she pressed the tiny clasp. The locket sprang open to reveal 2 photographs. On one side, a recent picture of Maggie with Nathan and Oliver, all 3 laughing during their trip to Mount A. Rainier. On the other side, a photo Maggie had never seen before, of a young woman with auburn curls very similar to her own, holding a toddler Maggie on her lap. "How did you?" Maggie began, her voice catching. "Jennifer helped me find it," Nathan explained. "It was in your original case file. I thought you should have it. A reminder that you're loved by many people, some here and some watching over you." Tears spilled down Maggie's freckled cheeks as she studied the image of her biological mother. "She looks happy here," she whispered. "She does," Nathan agreed, "and she would be so proud of the amazing person you've become." He helped her fasten the locket around her neck. "This way, you can keep both your families close to your heart." Maggie's hand closed around the locket, her expression one of profound understanding far beyond her years. "But they're not separate anymore," she said. "They're both part of me. Just like you said about heart gardens, there's room for everything and everyone I love." That night, as Nathan checked on the sleeping children one last time before heading to bed himself, he paused in Maggie's doorway. She had fallen asleep with the locket still clutched in her hand, a peaceful smile on her face. On her bedside table sat a framed photo of Elizabeth, placed there by Maggie herself weeks ago. "So Oliver's mom can watch over me too," she had explained. In that moment, Nathan felt Elizabeth's presence more strongly than he had since the accident, not as a painful absence, but as a guiding force that had somehow led them to this unexpected perfection. Their family wasn't what either of them had planned, but it was beautiful and whole in its own right. As he closed Maggie's door softly, Nathan whispered the words that had become his nightly ritual. "Thank you, Lizzie, for showing us the way forward. We're going to be okay." And for the first time since Elizabeth's passing, he believed it completely. Chapter 7. The Unexpected Family. 1 year had passed since that rainy day in Discovery Park when a scrappy red-headed girl had made an improbable bet, a sandwich in exchange for a smile. What had begun as a chance encounter had transformed into something none of them could have predicted. A family rebuilt from broken pieces into something new and beautiful. The Carter Lakeside estate, once a monument to grief and silence, now vibrated with life and purpose. On this particular Saturday morning in October, the anniversary of their first meeting, the house was in cheerful chaos as preparations for a special celebration were underway. In the kitchen, Maggie stood on a step stool beside Mrs. Peterson, carefully decorating cupcakes with swirls of blue and green frosting designed to look like the Earth as seen from space, a nod to Oliver's ongoing astronomical obsession. At 11, now officially Maggie Carter for a full 4 months, she had blossomed in ways that sometimes took Nathan's breath away. Her once wild auburn curls were still untamed, but now gleamed with health. Her formerly too thin frame had filled out with proper nutrition. The shadows that had once lingered beneath her eyes had long since disappeared. Most remarkable was her confidence, the certainty with which she moved through the world, secure in the knowledge that she was loved, that she belonged, that her place in the family was permanent and unquestionable. "Dad," she called as Nathan entered the kitchen, "do these look enough like planets? Oliver says they're too blue to be Earth, but I told him it depends on which NASA photos you look at." "Dad." The word still sent a wave of warmth through Nathan every time Maggie used it. She had begun testing it out cautiously in the weeks leading up to the adoption, but since the court hearing, she had embraced it fully, using it with the same natural ease that Oliver did. "They look exactly like Earth from the International Space Station," Nathan assured her, examining the cupcakes with exaggerated seriousness. "Astronaut approved, I'm certain." Maggie beamed, adding another swirl of blue to the cupcake in front of her. "Is everything ready outside? Oliver won't let me see the yard because he says it's a surprise, but I heard the delivery trucks this morning." "Almost ready," Nathan confirmed, helping himself to coffee from the pot Mrs. Peterson had prepared. "The tent is up, the tables are arranged, and the space simulator should be delivered in about an hour." The space simulator was actually a sophisticated virtual reality setup that Nathan had rented for the occasion. A celebration they had dubbed Found Family Day, marking the anniversary of Maggie and Oliver's first meeting. What had started as a small gathering had evolved into something more elaborate, with classmates, teachers, social workers, and colleagues all invited to commemorate the journey that had brought them together. Mr. Oliver is quite insistent that everything be scientifically accurate, Mrs. Peterson commented with fond exasperation. He's rearranged the seating chart 3 times to ensure the table arrangements match the pattern of the solar system. Nathan laughed, picturing his son's serious concentration as he directed the event staff. At 7, Oliver had recovered the confidence and enthusiasm that had characterized him before Elizabeth's accident, but with a new maturity that occasionally surprised even Nathan. His compassion for others, undoubtedly influenced by Maggie's presence, had deepened, as had his ability to articulate complex emotions. "I'd better go check on him before he decides to realign the actual planets," Nathan joked, heading toward the French doors that led to the backyard. The transformation of the grounds was impressive even to Nathan, who had approved all the plans. A large white tent dominated the lawn, sloping down to the lake, its sides rolled up to take advantage of the unseasonably mild October day. Beneath it, tables draped in deep blue cloths had been arranged in a pattern that did, indeed, mimic the solar system, with a larger sun table at the center, surrounded by planetary tables of varying sizes at accurate relative distances. Oliver stood in the middle of it all, clipboard in hand, deep in conversation with the head of the event staff. He looked up as Nathan approached, his face lighting with excitement. "Dad, the astronomy professor from UW just called and said he's bringing a real meteorite for the display table, an actual rock from space." His enthusiasm was contagious, his entire body practically vibrating with energy. "That's fantastic, buddy," Nathan replied, genuinely impressed by his son's networking abilities. The email Oliver had composed to the university's astronomy department, with minimal help from Nathan, had been both persuasive and endearing. "Do you think Maggie will like everything?" Oliver asked, a hint of vulnerability breaking through his excitement. "I want it to be perfect since it's our special day." "She's going to love it," Nathan assured him, resting a hand on his shoulder, "especially because you put so much thought into making it special." The bond between the siblings had only strengthened over the past year. Though they occasionally squabbled like any brothers and sisters, their connection was founded on a deep mutual understanding that sometimes left Nathan in awe. They protected each other fiercely, celebrated each other's successes without jealousy, and seemed to communicate in a shorthand that only they fully understood. By early afternoon, the backyard was transformed into a celebration of both space and family, Oliver's 2 greatest passions. Guests began arriving, bearing gifts and exclamations of delight at the elaborate setup. Jennifer Wilson came with her own children, who immediately gravitated toward the virtual reality space simulator. Patricia Gonzalez brought a framed copy of Maggie's adoption decree, beautifully matted and embellished with the quote, "Families are made from love, not just DNA." Melissa Andrews arrived with a contingent from Carter Technologies, including board members who had been initially skeptical of Nathan's reduced role at the company, but had since recognized the positive impact of his life restructuring. The company was thriving under their shared leadership model, with Nathan focusing on long-term strategy, while Melissa handled day-to-day operations, an arrangement that allowed him to be present for school events, science fairs, and impromptu family adventures. As the celebration hit full swing, Nathan found himself standing slightly apart, watching his children, both of them, his children, at the center of a circle of friends, demonstrating how to use the VR headsets to walk on Mars. Maggie's animated gestures and Oliver's detailed scientific explanations complemented each other perfectly, the guests alternately laughing at her jokes and marveling at his knowledge. "They're quite the team," a voice observed beside him. He turned to find Jennifer Wilson, a glass of lemonade in hand, watching the scene with professional satisfaction. "They really are," Nathan agreed. "I can hardly remember what life was like before Maggie arrived." "Silent and grey, from what I recall of our first meeting," Jennifer said gently. "You've all come so far." Nathan nodded. remembering the desperate father who had walked into Jennifer's office just over 8 months ago, determined to secure Maggie's place in their family. "We have, thanks in large part to your support." Jennifer shook her head modestly. "I just helped with the paperwork. The real transformation happened because you were brave enough to open your heart to a child who needed you as much as you needed her." She nodded toward Maggie, who was now helping a younger child adjust a VR headset. "She's a different person from the guarded, hyper-vigilant girl I knew in the foster system. She's found her home." "We all have," Nathan said softly. "In a way, she saved us as much as we saved her." As the afternoon progressed, the celebration evolved into a proper party, with music, games, and the space-themed cupcakes that had occupied Maggie all morning. Nathan had arranged for a professional photographer to capture the event, wanting to document this milestone in their journey as a family. During a lull in the festivities, Nathan called for everyone's attention, standing beneath the tent with a microphone the event staff had provided. "I want to thank all of you for coming today to celebrate what we're calling Found Family Day," he began, looking around at the gathered friends and supporters. "1 year ago today, through what I can only describe as a miraculous coincidence, Oliver and I met a remarkable young lady in Discovery Park who made us a simple offer, a sandwich, in exchange for making a very sad little boy smile." Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd as Maggie performed an exaggerated bow. What we didn't know then was that Maggie Dawson, now Maggie Carter, would not only make Oliver smile again, but would completely transform our lives. Nathan's voice grew more emotional as he continued. "There's a saying that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who want you in their lives so much that they do everything to help you find your place. That's what we've become. A family built not from obligation or biology, but from choice and love." He gestured for the children to join him, and they came willingly, one on each side. "I'd like to propose a toast," Nathan continued, raising his glass. "To found family, to the connections that heal us, the love that sustains us, and the joy of discovering that sometimes the most perfect additions to our lives come in completely unexpected packages." The guests raised their glasses in response, echoing, "To found family." As the party continued into the evening, with lanterns illuminating the tent and the virtual reality station still going strong, Nathan found a moment of quiet with the children at the edge of the lake. The three of them sat on the small dock, feet dangling over the water, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Do you think Mum can see us from heaven?" Oliver asked suddenly, his gaze fixed on the colorful horizon. Nathan put an arm around his son's shoulders. "I believe she can, and I think she's very proud of the amazing boy you've become." Maggie, who had been skipping stones across the calm water, paused thoughtfully. "I bet she and my first mom are friends up there," she suggested, "watching us together and thinking we make a pretty cool family." The image, so innocently offered yet profoundly comforting, brought a lump to Nathan's throat. "I bet you're right, Mags." "Dad," Oliver's voice was contemplative, "remember how before, when Mum first went to heaven, I stopped talking and you were sad all the time?" Nathan nodded, the memory of those dark months still painful but no longer overwhelming. "I remember, buddy. I was thinking about that today," Oliver continued, "about how everything was really, really bad. But then we met Maggie and things started getting better." He looked up at Nathan with the wisdom that sometimes emerged unexpectedly from his 7-year-old perspective. "It's like the universe knew exactly what we needed, even when we didn't." Maggie leaned against Nathan's other side. "Ms. Wilson says there are no accidents in the universe, that people come into our lives exactly when we need them." She fingered the locket that rarely left her neck, containing the photos of both her families. "I think she's right." As darkness fell and the party wound down, guests departing with VR-induced wonder and cupcake-fueled satisfaction, the core celebration continued in the Carter home. Mrs. Peterson had prepared a special dinner, all the children's favorites, which they ate in the kitchen rather than the formal dining room, recounting the day's highlights and planning future adventures. Later, after the children had finally succumbed to exhaustion and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Nathan stood in the doorway of Maggie's room watching her sleep. The room had evolved over the months to reflect her growing interests and personality, art supplies organized on custom shelves, books filling the bookcases, science fair medals hanging proudly beside artwork she had created. On her bedside table, the framed photo of Elizabeth remained, now joined by the family portrait taken at the adoption ceremony. Next, he checked on Oliver, who had kicked off his covers as usual. Nathan gently replaced the blanket, smoothing it over his son's shoulders. Oliver's room had changed too. The space theme remained, but photos of family outings now covered much of one wall, Maggie featuring prominently in most of them. On his desk sat a project they were working on together, a model of the Mars habitat Maggie had designed and Oliver was helping to construct, complete with scientifically accurate agricultural systems. Finally, Nathan made his way to his own bedroom, where Elizabeth's photograph still held a place of honor. He sat on the edge of the bed, studying her smiling face in the soft lamplight. "You would love her, Lizzie," he said softly to the image. "She's everything you would have wanted in a daughter, brave, kind, creative. She healed Oliver's heart. And mine too." He touched the frame gently. "I think maybe you had something to do with bringing her to us. It's too perfect to be just coincidence." The next morning, Sunday, their traditional family day, Nathan was awakened by the sounds of laughter and clattering from the kitchen. He followed the noise to find the children attempting to make pancakes with Mrs. Peterson's guidance, flour dusting their pajamas and grins splitting their faces. "Dad," Maggie exclaimed, "we're making celebration pancakes. Oliver's are planets, and mine are spaceships." "Very impressive," Nathan commented, examining the oddly shaped creations on their plates, "though that one looks more like a comet than a spaceship." "That's exactly what it is," Maggie protested. "I'm doing the whole solar system but with pancakes. Mrs. Peterson said I have artistic vision." "Visionary messiness, more like," Oliver teased, dodging the dish towel Maggie flicked in his direction. As they settled around the kitchen island with their creative breakfast, Nathan was struck by how far they had come. The house that had once echoed with silence now resonated with laughter. The meals that had once been mechanical necessities were now opportunities for connection and conversation. The future that had once seemed unbearably bleak now stretched before them, filled with possibility. "So," Nathan said, cutting into a pancake that might have been Jupiter, "what should we do today? The weather's supposed to be perfect." "Discovery Park," the children answered in unison, then dissolved into giggles at their synchronicity. "The park it is," Nathan agreed, his heart full, where it all began. Later that day, as they walked familiar trails through the park, Nathan watched his children race ahead. Maggie's red curls bouncing in the sunlight, Oliver's excited voice carrying back to him as he pointed out a hawk circling overhead. They found their way to the meadow overlook where they had first met Maggie, spreading a blanket in almost the exact spot. As they shared the picnic lunch Mrs. Peterson had packed, complete with star-shaped sandwiches that had become a tradition, Nathan marveled at the journey they had taken. From a broken father and a silent child to a vibrant family of 3, bound not by blood but by something perhaps even stronger, the choice to love, to heal, to move forward together. Oliver was pointing out cloud shapes to Maggie, who was embellishing his observations with elaborate stories about cloud civilizations and their diplomatic relations with birds. Their laughter carried across the meadow, drawing smiles from passing hikers. In that moment, watching his children, both of them, his children, Nathan felt a sense of completion that he had once thought would never be possible again. Their family wasn't what he and Elizabeth had planned all those years ago, but it was perfect in its own unexpected way. The girl who had asked for just a sandwich had given them back their laughter, their purpose, their sense of family. And in return, they had given her what she had been searching for through all those foster homes and temporary placements, a place where she truly belonged. As if sensing his thoughts, both children turned to look at him, their faces alight with contentment and security. In their eyes, Nathan could see the reflection of their shared future, bright, loving, and full of possibilities they would discover together. The unexpected family had found its way home. Fimda Historia. Dear listeners, we hope that Nathan, Oliver, and Maggie's journey has touched your heart. Their story reminds us that families come in all forms, and sometimes the most beautiful ones are created through unexpected circumstances. For more emotional stories like this one, we've created a special playlist filled with tales that explore love, healing, and the power of connection. You'll find it by clicking on the link to your left. If this story moved you, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of human relationships. Your support helps us continue